Welcome to the debate. Today we are dissecting one of the most influential narratives in human history. The moment a 75-year-old man is told to abandon his entire life for a promise he cannot see. We are analyzing the readings for the second Sunday of Lent, Year A, specifically through the lens of, well, the biblical commentator Marie-Noël Thabut and the blog notes of Thierry Gellas. The figure, of course, is Abraham.
And the question isn't just about history or theology. I mean, it's really about the fundamental nature of authority and agency. When the divine calls this man, Abram, to leave his country, is that an act of liberation? Or is it the ultimate demand for submission?
The source material we have, Thabut's commentary and Gellas's notes, it proposes a pretty bold thesis. They argue that this call, which is often viewed as a demand for, blind obedience, is actually a project designed solely for human happiness. I'm here to argue that the text supports this view, that the call to faith is the mechanism of human liberty.
And I'm here to argue that despite the optimistic framing by our commentators, the text actually reveals a transaction that requires the total surrender of autonomy. We are looking at a narrative of displacement, inevitable suffering, and a definition of happiness that looks, frankly, suspiciously like self-destruction.
Okay, well, let's get into the text. The centerpiece of Marie-Noël Thabut's argument, and really the pivot point for this entire debate, is a translation issue in Genesis chapter 12.
Right, the classic command, leave your country.
Exactly. In most English translations and, in the liturgical readings, it sounds like an eviction notice. Go. Leave. It's imperative. It's a command from a superior to a subordinate. It implies force. But Thabut points out that the underlying Hebrew, lech lecha, carries a nuance that completely changes the psychological landscape of the story.
Lech lecha.
Yes. It's a unique grammatical construction. Literally, it translates to go for yourself, or even go towards yourself.
That's a significant shift in tone.
It transforms the entire dynamic. Thabut brings in Rachi to explain this. And for those listening who might not know, Rachi was an 11th century medieval French rabbi and arguably one of the most important biblical commentators in history. Rachi looks at lech lecha and interprets it as go for your own good, for your own happiness.
So the argument is that God isn't saying do this because I said so. He's saying do this because it's the only way you will truly thrive.
Precisely. It reframes the command as a personal appeal to Abram's potential. If he stays in Haran in his father's house, he remains static. He remains just a branch on a family tree defined by his ancestors. By leaving, he moves toward his true identity. Thabut argues this proves that God's project is not about control. It's about the construction of the human subject. It is, as Gellas frames it in his notes, a project of liberty.
I appreciate the linguistic nuance, I do. It's poetic. Go toward yourself. It sounds like modern self-actualization. But I want to drag us back to the sociological reality of the ancient Near East for just a moment. Thabut mentions Rashi's happiness interpretation, but let's look at the inventory of what Abram is asked to discard. The text is brutal in its specificity. Leave your country, your kindred, and your father's house.
He has to leave his past, yes. That is the nature of change.
It's not just his past. In a tribal society, those three things, land, clan, father's house, are your entire legal and economic immune system. You didn't have a state police force to protect you, you had your kin. You didn't have a 401k or a bank account, you had your land rights. To tell a 75-year-old man to sever those ties is not a journey of self-discovery, it is social suicide. It is becoming a refugee.
You're painting a picture of destitution, but you're ignoring the second half of the equation. Thabut emphasizes that while Abram is torn from his natural destiny, he is immediately invested with a new one. The text follows a command with a massive promise. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you. I will make your name great.
But notice the timing. The loss is immediate. The promise is perspective.
Well, that's the nature of the risk Thabut discusses. But look at what is being promised. In the ancient world, happiness wasn't a fleeting feeling. It was a legacy, a great name, a lineage, blessing. God is offering Abram a level of existence that his life in Haran could never provide. My position is that security is not the same thing as happiness. Staying in Haran was safe. but it was a dead end. The happiness Rashi speaks of is the fulfillment of a destiny that ripples out to the entire world.
Okay, that brings us to the universal project. Thabit makes a strong case that this isn't just about Abram's ego. She highlights the line, "In you all the families of the earth will be blessed."
It's crucial. It changes the call from a private favor to a geopolitical strategy. God chooses one man not to exclude the others, but to reach the others. Thabit calls it a universal project. Abram is the conduit. The blessing flows through him to everyone else.
I struggle with the mechanism of this project, though. And this is where I think the liberty argument hits a wall. The text immediately sets up a binary system. God says, "I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will reprove." This isn't universal, unconditional love. This is a protection racket. Align with my guy, and you're safe. Cross him, and you're done.
Protection racket is a cynical reading of a covenant relationship.
Is it? If liberty is the goal, why is the blessing conditional on political alignment with Abram? That sounds like hierarchy, not liberty. It sounds like you are either with the program or you are an enemy of the state.
That Butt addresses this directly. She argues that this specific phrasing actually preserves human freedom. She writes that the other nations remain free not to enter into this blessing.
Free to be cursed? That's not much of a choice.
Free to opt out. Listen to Jalus's motto for the blog, "Nothing by force, everything by love." If the blessing were automatic, if God just zapped everyone with good vibes, regardless of their choices, human agency would be dissolved. By making the blessing accessible through a relationship with Abram, but not mandatory, God respects the sovereignty of the nations. They have to choose the blessing. The fact that you can curse Abram and face the consequences is proof that the system respects your agency. It validates that your choices have weight.
That's a coerced choice, though. I mean, kiss the ring or face the consequences is technically a choice, but we don't usually call it liberty. But let's set aside the geopolitics and look at the internal experience of Abram. Thabit admits this is a leap into the unknown. She quotes the letter to the Hebrews. He left without knowing where he was going.
A pivotal detail.
It is. Because in any other context, if I tell you, go for your own good, but I refuse to show you the map, the destination, or the timeline, and you follow me, that isn't liberty. That is capitulation. How can obedience be free if it isn't informed? If I don't know the terms of the contract, I can't freely sign it.
And this is where the context of Lent becomes vital. We are in the second Sunday of Lent. Thabit contrasts this reading specifically with the reading from the previous Sunday, which featured Adam.
The fall.
Right. To understand Abram, you have to understand Adam. Thabit defines the Adam archetype as the human who suspects God. The serpent's argument to Adam was essentially, God is holding out on you. God is a rival. He forbids the fruit because he's jealous of your potential. Adam's fall was a failure of trust. He wanted to seize knowledge because he suspected God's intentions were bad.
And Abram is the correction.
Abram is the antidote. Thabit argues that Abram is the man who believes that God is amor, love. When he hears, go for yourself, he doesn't suspect a trap, he assumes benevolence. He assumes that the voice knows more than he does.
See, I read the Adam story differently. Adam wanted to know good and evil for himself. He wanted intellectual autonomy. He wanted to see the map. You're arguing that the correction to this, the path to happiness, is to suppress that critical drive, to stop asking where are we going and simply start walking. That sounds like the definition of giving up your agency.
It's not suppression, it's empiricism.
Empiricism? Following a voice into the desert is the opposite of empiricism. Empiricism requires data.
Not according to Thabit. Look at the psalm she pairs with this, Psalm 33. He is faithful in all he does. Thabit notes that for Israel, this trust isn't a blind leap in the dark. It is un affaire de expérience, a matter of experience. She cites the Exodus. She cites the manna. The people of Israel trust this voice because historically, it has liberated them from slavery and fed them in the wilderness.
But Abram didn't have the Exodus yet. He was the first. He had 0 data points.
He was the first, but the text is being read by us, the descendants. Thabit is saying that we, the listeners, have the data set that Abram started. We know the story ends with survival. You don't ask for a map when the person leading you is a fireman pulling you out of a burning building. You trust their competence because the situation demands it.
That analogy holds up only if the fireman actually saves you from the fire. But does he? This brings us to the second reading from 2 Timothy, which Thabit analyzes. And this is where I find the happiness argument hardest to swallow.
This is the passage where Paul is writing to Timothy from prison.
Yes, let's contextualize this. Paul is in a Roman dungeon. He knows he is going to be executed. He is writing his final will and testament to his protege. And he tells Timothy, take your share of suffering.
It's a heavy command. Bear your share of hardship for the gospel.
And in the same breath, the text claims Christ has destroyed death. There is a massive cognitive dissonance here. Paul is about to have his head cut off. Historically, we know he dies. So in what meaningful sense has death been destroyed, and how does taking your share of suffering align with the go for your happiness promise we started with? If the result of Lech Lechia is a Roman prison cell, I'm not sure I want to go.
It is a paradox, I grant you. But the Buddha is very intellectually honest here. She doesn't sugarcoat it. She writes, quote, On ne peut donc pas dire que Jésus a détruit la mort biologique. We cannot say Jesus destroyed biological death. That remains a reality. Everyone dies.
So the promise fails the physical test.
No, the promise transcends the physical test. Thabit argues that the good news, the evangelium, is that biological death acts as a boundary for the body, but not for the relationship. She quotes the funeral liturgy. Life is not destroyed, it is transformed. The happiness Rachi spoke of and the liberty Jallis discusses is a specific kind of freedom, the freedom from the fear of death.
That's a stoic victory. At best, I'm not afraid to die.
It's more than stoicism. Stoicism is enduring pain because you have to. It's grit. This is enduring pain because you know it cannot touch the core of who you are. The book writes, in us, there's a life made of our relationship to God that nothing, not even biological death, can destroy. If you believe that, you are the most free person on earth. Paul in chains is freer than the Roman emperor because the emperor is terrified of losing power, while Paul isn't even freed of losing his life. That is the indestructible life the book points to.
I see the power in that. I really do. It's a beautiful mechanism for resilience. But I have to ask, if this knowledge makes you indestructible, why is it so unevenly distributed? This leads us to the gospel reading, the Transfiguration.
Matthew chapter 17, a crucial moment.
Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, just 3 guys, up a high mountain. His face shines like the sun. His clothes become white as light. Moses and Elijah appear. It is the visual proof of everything you just argued, that death is permeable, that the glory is real.
The book calls it the revelation of the God of tenderness. It connects the dots. It shows that the project started with Abram, the law, that's Moses, and the prophets, Elijah, culminates in this glorified Christ. It's the verification of the hypothesis.
But look at the logistics. It's a secret event. Jesus explicitly orders them, tell no one about this vision. Thabit notes this command for silence. My question is, if this is a universal project meant to bless all the families of the earth, why is the definitive proof restricted to an inner circle on a lonely mountain? Why doesn't he show the whole world?
Thabit explains the necessity of that secrecy. It's a timing issue. He says, tell no one until the Son of Man has risen from the dead.
Why wait?
Because without the cross, the glory is misleading. The Thabit points out that the people were expecting a political Messiah, a king who would kick out the Romans. If Peter and James went down the mountain shouting, he is glowing with divine light, the crowds would have rioted to make him king. They would have tried to use his power for political ends. The Transfiguration is too complex to be understood properly until you see the suffering servant on the cross. You can't have the glory without the sacrifice.
Fair enough, but it reinforces a structural dynamic that I find troubling throughout these readings. You have the multitudes who are promised blessing, but they don't get the vision. They have to rely on the testimony of the few. Abram hears the voice, his family just has to pack their bags and follow. Peter, James, and John see the light, the other 9 disciples just have to take their word for it. The structure of this liberty looks an awful lot like hierarchy.
It looks like hierarchy if you view it as privilege. Thabit argues it is actually service.
How is seeing the glory of God not a privilege?
because of what it's for. The Boot notes that in the Bible, never is a vocation for the selfish interest of the one called. Abram is called for the nations. The apostles are shown the transfiguration so they can have the strength to lead the church through the trauma of the crucifixion. It's not a VIP pass. It's equipment for a very difficult job. And notice the instruction from the cloud.
This is my beloved son.
And the command.
Listen to him.
Again, obedience.
But a specific kind.
Subut connects this to the prophecy in Deuteronomy, where God promises a prophet like Moses. The command, listen to him, is the equalizer. Peter saw the light, but we, the multitudes, have access to the same truth through listening. The word allows us to access what the mystics saw. You don't have to climb the mountain to get the data. You just have to listen to the testimony.
Listen to him. It brings us full circle back to the beginning. Abram had to listen to the voice to leave Haran. The disciples have to listen to Jesus to understand the transfiguration. It always comes back to the ear.
And Thabit ends her commentary on the transfiguration with a fascinating observation about the book of Daniel. She notes that the term Son of Man, which Jesus uses for himself, doesn't just refer to a single messianic figure. In Daniel, it represents the people of the saints of the Most High.
Meaning us?
Meaning the collective. Thabit's point is that the transfiguration isn't just about Jesus showing off. It's a preview of human destiny. The promise is that all humanity is destined to be transfigured, to share in that same light. She writes that the realization of this project is even more beautiful than the promise. The hierarchy is temporary. The destiny is universal.
That is the hope. And it is a staggering one. But as we wrap up, I have to look at the ledger one last time. On the credit side, we have the promise of liberty, love, and a destiny that transcends death. We have the assurance that God's plan is for our ultimate happiness.
A happiness that defines who we truly are.
But on the debit side, the cost of doing business is incredibly high. To get there, Abram has to commit social suicide and become a wanderer. Paul has to accept a Roman prison and a sword to the neck. The disciples have to navigate secrecy, fear, and confusion. The text redefines saving to mean spiritual survival rather than physical rescue. The happiness Thabit speaks of requires a surrender of agency so total that one must be willing to walk without a map.
And that surrender, I would argue, is the only mechanism that breaks the cycle of suspicion. If we demand to control every variable, if we demand the map before we move, we remain trapped in Haran. We remain trapped in our own limitations. By trusting the go for yourself, by trusting that the authority is benevolent, we escape the smallness of our own plans. The evidence offered, from the survival of the Jewish people to the resilience of the martyrs, suggests that the leap into the unknown lands on solid ground.
The listeners will have to decide for themselves if that evidence is sufficient to justify the leap. Whether go for yourself is the ultimate command of freedom or a command to abandon the only security we actually have.
Indeed. As Thabit says, the realization may be more beautiful than the promise, but the journey between the two remains a mystery.
That concludes our discussion for this week.
Join us next time on The Debate.